Afternoon tea at the Literature Museum, a space where we slow down, sip some tea, and read the world as literature.
Hello, my name is Teresa, and I'm one of the hosts of this podcast. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little story about how this podcast started. In many ways, this is an experimental program. It all began with a one-on-one English tutoring class. My co-host Sonia is a very hardworking person who always shows strong motivation and a willingness to learn. During our weekly sessions, we read and discussed a wide range of topics, from literature and culture to society, psychology, and even environmental issues. Over time, those conversations became deeper and more engaging. Sometimes a single question will lead us into a much broader reflection about culture, society, or the human condition. I've always been someone who enjoys trying new things and coming up with new ideas, sometimes a little unexpected. I also like turning those ideas into something practical. So one day I asked Sonia, why don't we turn our conversations into a podcast? And that was how this whole project began. Gradually, what started as an English conversation class became something more, a journey of thinking together. Perhaps I should also briefly introduce the two of us. Sonia holds a PhD in Taiwanese literature from National Tsinghua University, and she currently serves as the executive secretary at the Wang Moren and Zhou Anyi Literature Museum. As for me, Teresa, I'm currently a PhD candidate in the International Intercollegiate PhD program at National Tsinghua University. Before returning to Taiwan, I studied in Spain, where I specialized in discourse studies. My academic background is mainly in language education, particularly EFL, ESP, and EMI teaching. But I also have a strong interest in cultural studies, and I have conducted long-term fieldwork on the reception of foreign cultures in Taiwan. Because of our different academic backgrounds and experiences, our conversations often move across many fields. Although literature is usually our starting point, our discussions frequently expand into psychology, sociology, cultural studies, environmental issues, and many other areas. So in this sense, this podcast is not only about literature, but also about exploring ideas from an interdisciplinary perspective. There's also a generational difference between us. I'm in my 30s and Sonia is in her 50s. That gap sometimes brings very different perspectives, and that's exactly what makes our conversation interesting. Our discussions often become a kind of cross-generational dialogue, where different experiences and viewpoints meet and interact. Some listeners may also wonder why we chose to conduct this podcast in English. The reason is actually quite simple. It grew directly out of our English tutoring sessions, but there is also a pedagogical dimension to it. In our regular classes, the focus was often on spontaneous speaking, responding quickly and building fluency. With this podcast, however, we experiment with a slightly different approach, combining discussion with prepared speaking, which allowed us to pay more attention to clarity and accuracy. As a language teacher and researcher, I find this experiment particularly meaningful. At the same time, recording this podcast allows our conversations to move beyond the classroom. Instead of disappearing once the class ends, our discussions are transformed into something more tangible, something that can be shared, listened to, and reflected upon. In that sense, this podcast also becomes a record of our learning journey. I know that life can be busy, and it's not always easy to find time to sit down and read or think deeply. But maybe in just 10 or 15 minutes, during a commute, a short break, or a quiet moment, you can explore a new idea, do a bit of critical thinking, and even pick up some English along the way. So, whether you are interested in literature, interdisciplinary ideas, or simply thoughtful conversations. We are very happy that you are here. I'm Teresa, and this is Afternoon Tea at the Literature Museum. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, and we hope you'll join us for this wonderful journey.